friends! Thank you for joining me for my first pre-recorded Kids Craft Hour. This month we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of having a live video, I will be premiering the video on YouTube and will be available in the chat area for you to ask questions and to help guide you along during the project. I think this is going to be a lot better for both of us, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns during the craft. If you're watching this on a replay, feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to get back to you with any answers to your questions. Tonight we're going to be working on these fun tinfoil sculptures. We're going to be using cardboard and aluminum foil, as well as acrylic paint and black oil pastel. So get your materials together. I'm going to go over the list and then we'll jump into the project. For this craft, you are going to need glue, tape. I'm using packing tape. We're going to be applying this to the back of our sculpture. So you want to make sure it's thick enough to cover the edge of the foil to keep it nice and smooth. Next, you're going to need a pencil, as well as an eraser, scissors, cardboard. I have two pieces that are about 8 by 10, and that should be more than enough for this project. Next thing you're going to need are 3 colors at least of acrylic paint. You're welcome to use any colors you want. Just make sure they're brightly colored so they show up well on the tinfoil. Next thing you need is aluminum foil. I like to use the heavy-duty aluminum foil. The normal aluminum foil tends to rip a bit easier. The last thing you're going to need is a black oil pastel. And one thing that is not on the list that you're going to need for painting is a paintbrush and some water. Okay, now you may notice I have these little pennies and some twine over here. If you want, you can add things like that under the tinfoil, on top of the cardboard or on its own, and that is going to create even more depth. Now, for the base of your sculpture, this is a 9 by 12 piece of cardboard. I have this old Legion pad. This one is 8 by 10. And so you can go bigger or smaller. My first one was larger. So all I'm going to do is rip the back part off. All right, so this is going to be the base for my sculpture, okay? Like I said, you can use larger or smaller. The reason I like to use these is because they're a little bit thicker than cardboard and a little less flimsy, so it gives you a good solid backing for your sculpture. Okay, so you want to take your cardboard and whatever shapes you want to create for your sculpture. So if you want to create triangles, one easy way to do that is just to start cutting the corner, okay? You can literally just go just like that and you have a triangle, okay? And that's how I created most of these that you see on the sculpture. So like I said, larger, smaller, it's up to you, and it's really going to depend on what size your board is for the base of your sculpture. Okay, so for me, I want to do more rounded shapes this time. You could take things and trace to make a circle. Okay, if you want to make a circle, there's one circle. Okay, and since my board is pretty small, that's probably the largest shape I'm going to be creating for mine, because I want to also incorporate the pennies, and I don't want them to become too large. Okay, so I'm going to go over this with a Sharpie. You don't have to do this, it just makes it a little bit easier to see. And if it's not perfect, that's okay, because this is going to be cut out and you'll adhere it to your sculpture base. And then it's going to be covered up with tin foil, so you're not going to see this. So after you have drawn your shape and outlined it, if you want to do that, you're just going to cut it out. All right, so there's your circle, if you drew a circle. Okay, and this is my first shape, and I'm not going to glue it down yet because I might want to move them around and shift them a bit, so I'm just going to wait to actually add the glue. So you're just going to continue creating shapes and cutting them out, and you're going to play with them on your board to create the placement you want. Once you've created that placement, then we're going to use our glue, and we're going to go back, glue our pieces down, and allow them to dry. I'm going to skip the pencil and just go straight to marker. You are welcome to do the same. Do not feel like you have to draw the same shapes as I am. Draw whatever you would like to see in your sculpture, okay? I'm going to draw some more circles because I want to overlap them and create some depth. I'm going to cut these out. So I have these shapes and I have some pennies. Okay, and I also have some twine. So I'm going to play around with these and see where I want to place them on my board. And there's no right or wrong way to do this, okay? So don't feel like if you do it differently than me, you're making a mistake. You are not making a mistake, okay? You are doing artwork in your style, okay? And that's important to remember. And if you've got your artwork laid out, you can take your glue and start gluing the pieces down. Okay, so I'm just gonna get it going there. and then just glue it down. Now that you've got your cardboard sculpture base laid out, we're going to let this dry. And while we're letting it dry, we're going to pick out our paint colors, okay? So for my sample project, I used light pink, blue, and yellow for my acrylic paint colors. Today I'm going to be using neon pink, pale green, and orange yellow, and I'm using the same type of paint I used on this. It's just Arteza acrylic paints in a tube. Okay, so once your sculpture base is dry, we are going to take our tin foil we're going to place it over our sculpture base. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Okay, so for this next step, you want to make sure your aluminum foil is at least an inch or so larger than your sculpture base. Okay, so my sculpture base is 8 by 10, so that means I need my aluminum foil to be at least 9 inches wide by 11 inches tall. Okay, and it's going to be hard to hear me over this tin foil. Let's see. So this is a great way you can ensure that your tin foil is large enough. Just put it under your structure base, and this is how much area you're going to have left. So now I'm going to just make sure, okay, I have plenty of room on every side. So now what we're going to do is put our sculpture base under our aluminum foil. I'm going to put it right on top. And we're just going to start pressing it down and working it around the edges of our shapes. And make sure that it's flat against the board and flat against the edges of the shapes, okay? So I like to do the outline first, just so I know where the edges are. And this does take a little bit of work to get it around all the shapes and work it in there, but it's gonna be a lot more prominent once we paint and add our oil pastels. So don't worry if it doesn't show up as much as you want just yet. If you forget where all your shapes are, you can just lift it up like that, but make sure you keep your hand over the part that is done, because you don't want to lift that up from the shape. So we're going to flip it over. And we're going to press the edges down against the back of the board. Now you want to take your tape, and we're just going to run it along the edges. That's another reason I like packing tape, because I can let it rest on the desk without it rolling away. Cut that. Okay, now you can flip it over. You can really start working those edges in without having to worry about the tinfoil coming up. I'm just going around the sides just to help it stay in place. You can see I did get a little rip in my tinfoil, but it's okay. If that happens to you, don't worry about it. If it's a big tear, you do want to get a new piece of tinfoil and start over from that part, because you don't want a big hole in your tinfoil. Okay. Now what we're going to do is take our acrylic paint, okay, and you're only going to need just a little bit, okay. I'm going to be using neon pink. Orange yellow, and pale green. Okay, what we're going to do now is add our acrylic paint. So we're only going to paint over our shapes. We are not going to paint the background at all. We want to keep that silver and keep the aluminum foil showing through. You're just going to take a little bit on your brush and just start covering the shapes. And you don't want a thick coat. You want to keep it thin to make sure that it sticks. And as you paint, the pressure you use from your paintbrush is just going to help work the paint into the foil, and it's going to bring out your shapes even more. Now that you've painted your sculpture, you should have something that looks a little like this. We are going to let these dry for a couple minutes before we move on to adding our oil pastel. If you notice some of your shapes don't have a lot of definition, that's totally fine. Once we add the oil pastel, it's really going to add a contrast with the black and really make these guys stand out, and you'll see a lot more dimension, and your shapes will be more visible around the edges. So the next step, we're going to take our oil pastel and make sure it's black, because that's what's going to give you this strong contrast between the aluminum foil and the edges of your shapes. And we are just going to rub over all of our shapes around the edges and over the corrugated areas where you may have put twine, pennies, whatever you were using, and it's going to start giving us this tin finish and create depth. So once your paint has dried, you're going to take your oil pastel and you're just going to start going along the edges of your shapes. And you don't want to press down too hard, because again, you want to be cautious to not rip the aluminum foil, but you want to press down just enough to start getting definition. And you should have something like this. Now when you're done, be sure to flip it over and add your signature. And you have a beautiful foil sculpture. Okay, so now that we're done, you should have something that looks like this. A cool tin aluminum foil cardboard sculpture. Be sure to sign your name on the back. Next month, we are going to be creating watercolor roses. This Kids Craft Hour will be held on May 4th, so if you want to create this artwork for someone special for Mother's Day, you will have plenty of time to do so. Be sure to visit my website at crystalbotifer.com to see more events, RSVP for next month's Kids Craft Hour, which will also be on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.